Stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by.
Welcome to today's meeting of the Fire Committee. On our agenda today is a question and answer session with the London Fire Commissioner and the Deputy Mayor for Planning, Regeneration and the Fire Brigade, and other guests I'll introduce shortly. Before we begin, we have a few small items of business. Please may I remind participants to silence your devices. Members of the public may like to follow @London Assembly on social media and use the hashtag #AssemblyFire for this meeting. Can I ask our clerk, Lauren Harvey, to confirm any apologies for today's meeting?
Thank you, Chair. We have no apologies for absence and Assembly Member Cooper joining us online.
Thanks, Lauren. Can we note the list of offices held by Assembly members?
Noted.
Can I also ask members if they have any disclosable pecuniary interests in specific items listed on the agenda? Thank you. Can we confirm the minutes of a meeting held on 13th of January 2026? Thank you. Can we note the completed, closed and outstanding actions arising from previous meetings of the committee and the additional correspondence sent and received?
Noted.
Thank you. Can we note the following responses to committee outputs: the response from the Deputy Mayor for Planning, Regeneration and the Fire Service to the committee's letter on key priorities for the London Fire Commissioner, and the response from the Mayor of London to the committee's letter regarding arson in London?
Noted.
Thank you. Can we note the recent action taken by me as Chair and the delegated authority in consultation with party group lead members to agree the committee's report, Exposure to Fire Contaminants in London, a Hidden Growing Risk, and the committee's letter to the London Fire Commissioner regarding the well-being of London's firefighters?
Noted.
Thank you. We can now move on to our main item, a question and answer session with the London Fire Brigade and the Deputy Mayor for Planning, Regeneration and the Fire Service. Can I welcome our guests, Jules Pipe, CBE, Deputy Mayor for Planning, Regeneration and the Fire Service, Jonathan Smith, London Fire Commissioner. And joining us for the first part of today's meeting, we have Sally Hopper, Director for People at London Fire Brigade, and Naran Mathada, Independent Chair of Professional Standards. Welcome all. Before the discussion begins, can I please remind guests and members to position your microphones so you can be heard clearly in the chamber and on the webcast, moving it closer to you by picking up from the base if required and not by the neck. That is all the housekeeping done. Commissioner, if I can begin with you, how would you assess the progress made to date on the recommendations set out in Nazir Afzal's review?
Good morning, everyone. Well, I think I'll begin actually with our staff survey results that we got at the end of last year. So if it's okay with the Chair, I'll just go through the bullying, harassment and discrimination figures that we've now got. So in a year's period between 2024 and 2025, so bullying reduced from 8% to 5%, harassment 9% to 3%, and discrimination 13% to 6%. And I think when you look at that in the context of where we've come from in the aftermath of Nazir Afzal's review, I think that really does show a trajectory of travel. When you compare those statistics to other fire and rescue services in the country, actually it looks very favourable when you look at the progress we've made across the sector. And actually, when you compare it to other like-for-like public sector organisations, now anyone experiencing bullying, harassment and discrimination in the organisation is one person too many. And we have to be relentless in terms of what we do as an organisation to make sure that everybody feels safe and secure at work. But I think the data is telling us a direction of travel that we've seen over the course of the last 3 to 4 years since we received the review. And also we've had the external scrutiny from His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services, which again lifted us out of engaged measures, because quite rightly we were put into our equivalent of special measures in the aftermath of the culture review. They've come back, had a look at the organisation, had a look at the progress that we've made over the last 4 years and took the decision to lift us out of engaged measures. And then, of course, the HMI report that we received in 2024 once again had shown an improved trajectory of travel for the organisation. And some of those key recommendations that sit within the culture review have helped us on this improvement journey when we've looked at the organisation in its widest possible remit. And we've taken the action that we've needed to. We've introduced things like a culture advisory panel that's chaired by Martin Ford, KC, that gives us some additional scrutiny. Indeed, the board that Niran is now chairing, which I'm sure we'll get into in the committee, is another way that we're maintaining that independent oversight of the organisation. We've also got our community forum to make sure that we never forget what we're here for, which is to serve the communities of London, which plays a key part in the culture of the organisation itself. But the key thing for me is we're seeing both qualitative and quantitative evidence of improvement around culture and a whole range of other metrics that we can trace back to the culture review, the recommendations that came from that review. But we have to be, one of the things I've always said to this committee and elsewhere is that it's not a start and finish piece of work. We don't go from a position where there were legitimate challenges to the culture of the organisation and legitimate criticisms, which we accepted in their entirety, to now saying that we've resolved all of those issues and our culture is in a really, really good place. This is something you have to be relentless about. You know, we employ 6,000 human beings and they come with their strengths and their weaknesses, and we have to be really, really confident about what we stand for as an organisation, the values that we adhere to and the behaviours that we expect to see. And where we see those behaviours misalign with the values of the organisation, we have to deal with that. That's why the Professional Standards Unit was established in the first place, and all the work that Sally and her team are doing to make sure that everybody knows that if you cross that threshold, if you behave in a way that's contrary to the values of the organisation, there's a consequence to it. But of course, what we've also got to really work to is that the vast, vast majority of the people who come and work for the London Fire Brigade want to do so because they care about this city. They want to be part of a world-class emergency service, and we have to make sure we create the environment that everybody is able to flourish. So I am pleased with our response not only to the recommendations from the Nazir Afzal review itself, because that's only one part of an overarching culture transformation programme that we've been on over the course of the last 4 years, but we are now starting to see that in both qualitative and quantitative data that shows that we are heading in the right direction. But again, you just simply can't be content to establish where we are. We have to keep coming back to it time and time again, which is why that external scrutiny, as well as our own internal mechanisms, are really, really important to keep us on the straight and narrow.
Thank you. And Deputy Mayor, the same question to you.
Thank you, Chair. I'd only be repeating the detail that the Commissioner just gave you. I always said that it's going to be a long journey. It would be the longest. It would take of all the tasks that that the brigade have, it would be the one that's going to take the longest time because it's turning a ship. Slow staff turnover. A lot of this is dependent on obviously education, learning of existing staff, but for some people it might be a case of staff turnover. And I think the figures have shown that unexpectedly good, in terms of speed, progress has been made. But as the Commissioner has said, still a fair way to go and number of mechanisms in place to bear down on it. So not complacent, but pleased with the progress.
Thank you. And Sally.
Thank you. So before I got the job in January 25, I was aware that the London Culture Review was something that very much had come to be recognised and a national talking conversation about London Fire Brigade. And when I got into the job, I was aware that we'd had some positive feedback, as the Commissioner has said, in November 24 from HMI, but still 7 areas for improvement that sit in my directorate. And those 7 areas for improvement with the HMI are things that I've been working on ever since with a number of colleagues to continuously improve. And they include everything from the way we're represented, the composition levels, right through to how one gets promoted, and right through to how we show up at work each day and interact with each other, and building trust and confidence in all of the things that we do. So those 7 areas for improvement have been a really good opportunity for me to continuously improve what work had already been done when I arrived. And then, of course, I'm cognizant that we've also had the Action and Ambition in April 25 from Assembly members with the 10 recommendations, and they were very complementary to the 7 areas for improvement from HMI. And that scrutiny and that spotlight has really held us to account. And I think I can feel visible progress in our culture and improvements since that time.
Thank you. And Niran, did you want to come in here?
Yeah, thank you. So in terms of the work that I did when I was responsible for the fire team, when the Culture Review was first published, and in preparation for today and also for my role, I went back and read the review in some detail. And coming back in now, and the 6 months that I've spent here, there is a marked difference in terms of kind of how far the brigade has come. The openness and transparency, people coming forward, feeling free to be able to tell me exactly how they feel about the organisation, my ability and in terms of my independence, being able to speak to as many people as I possibly can during that time. It definitely feels like a very different place to the place that existed when the review happened. So that in itself for me feels very much like progress.
Thank you. Assemblymember Bokhari.
Thank you. I'd like to dig in further about the Nazir Afzal report. Now, I've asked you, Commissioner, already about having a short independent follow-up review of the Afzal report, and you indicated that this was unnecessary because His Majesty's Inspectorate will be inspecting the brigade later this year. So I wrote to the Inspector, Lee Freeman, and I asked him about the review, and he confirmed the inspection will not involve a structured evaluation of the progress made by the recommendations of Nazir Afzal. Now, given that, I want to ask you again whether you're still deciding not to commission a dedicated follow-up progress review. Now, we know that Dr Fairfield has done so for the Metropolitan Police since the case review. Why aren't we holding the London Fire Brigade to the same standard of scrutiny?
Well, I think in response to that, what I would say is that, yes, the HMI will be coming in and they won't be specifically looking at the 23 recommendations that came from Nazir Afzal's review, but they will be looking at the culture of the organisation. There will also be a key focus on leadership at all levels of the organisation, which for me has always been how we're going to crack this, the truth be told, because a review will come forward with recommendations and recommendations that we will then use to help improve the organisation. But actually how we continue to drive the cultural improvement of London Fire Brigade is through our leadership at every level, through the leadership I provide as the London Fire Commissioner, my senior executive team, and the senior leadership team, but also local leadership. So how are our leading firefighters, sub-officers, station officers who have far more influence over the culture of the organisation than I ever could at a local level? And that the HMI will be looking at in real detail. And the scrutiny environment that the London Fire Brigade operates in now is completely different to where we were either just prior to the culture review or in the immediate aftermath, both in terms of the Culture Advisory Panel, which is chaired by Martin Ford, KC, as I was mentioning before, the work that Niran is now doing, our community forum, our audit committee, and indeed the scrutiny that's provided by this committee. We are not short of scrutiny, which has been a huge driver for our improvement. So I think for this year, I think we need to concentrate on what the HMI come back, and they'll give us a review of the whole organisation. And then if we need to have another look further down the track, then we will always do that. But at this moment in time, I think the scrutiny environment that we're in is keeping us on the straight and narrow as an organisation, and we are seeing that in the data, as I was just alluding to in the answer to my first question, which means I can see there is a positive trajectory of travel, and we need to keep going on that. So we'll always have a look, but I think at this moment in time, given the HMI are going to be in this year, I think we need to allow that inspection to come back with its findings, and then we can take decisions moving forward.
I'll be writing to the Inspector again, because I'm not fully reassured that we are going to have a review that have an inspector that is actually looking at the review specifically. This is my concern, and one of the recommendations from the Nazir Afzal review was on Freemasonry. Again, another question that I did ask you about. You know, when I asked you about the specific obligation of London Fire Brigade employees to declare Freemason membership, you said that you would keep under consideration any learnings from the Met's experience of requiring officers to disclose it. We've just seen that the legal challenge to the Metropolitan Police was dismissed by the High Court. Mm-hmm. So are you going to follow suit and require that every member, all staff members, declare Freemasonry membership?
So just in response to that specific question, so you're right, the last time I was in front of the Assembly when I was here for the plenary, I did say we needed to consider the outcomes from the judicial review into the Met Police's decision. Now we're currently doing that, so that's sat with our legal team at the moment. So I'm waiting for advice on what any more we need to do as an organisation, bearing in mind the findings from that judicial review, which I'm committed to doing. You know, our declarations of interest policy that we had was reviewed after the Nazir Afzal review to strengthen that position. We now need to look at the findings from the judicial review into Freemasonry specifically that the Met Police put forward, because obviously we're governed differently to the Met Police. So if we need to strengthen what we do in terms of our declarations of interest policy, I'm absolutely committed to doing that. But of course, we have to make sure it follows the law and the HR structures that we are subject to, which are different to the police. But my commitment is we want to be as open and as transparent as we possibly can. If we need to strengthen what we've currently got, that's absolutely fine. But we're just seeking that legal advice now that we've had the judicial review into the Met decision to then see what any more we need to do as an organisation. But my commitment is to be completely open and transparent and make the changes that we think we can.
After the inspectorate, after the inspection, after your internal reviews, is there any chance that you will consider doing a follow-up review that really specifically looks at those recommendations of Nazir Afzal? Because I'm still not seeing a commitment there that I am worried about right now.
Well, I think if you look at the number of the recommendations that Nazir Afzal's review put forward, we've delivered against those. One of the reasons we overhauled our people services function was as a result of the Jenny Sindnit review that was done into people service, which was a direct recommendation that came from Nazir Afzal, and we've done that right across the board. Now, once the HMI have come in and they've given us a review of where we are as an organisation, which will include the culture of the organisation, albeit not specifically on the 23 recommendations from the review, I think we'll then be able to come back here and have that discussion about if there's any more we need.
Well, you'll definitely be getting questions from me, you know that for sure.
But I think at this moment in time, I'm content with the scrutiny environment that we're currently operating in, but if there's more for us to do, there's more for us to learn, then we will always be open to that.
Okay. I'm going to go to Neera now, who I'm really pleased to hear has been appointed as the independent chair for PSU. One of the recommendations that we made from our own report was to ensure that there was real independence from the PSU. What are your priorities, and are you concerned that perhaps the fact that this is a big role, but you've been given this role part-time? Are you your commitment is there, I'm sure, but do you feel like you can actually deliver some of those priorities that we're really concerned about?
So just in terms of the first part of your question, my priorities very much are to scrutinise the performance of the Professional Standards Unit. I want to ensure that it is working. It's working well. It has its independence. It is a trusted part of the organisation, which is absolutely key, and it is essentially changing the culture within the organisation. It's only one part of it, but it is an absolutely critical part of it. And in terms of my time, I have spent sort of a great deal of time. Obviously, I know the Fire Brigade fairly well from my last role, but spending time with people in the organisation has been really key to me. Also, the board that we have also established, we actually have we went out to the organisation. We asked people if they were interested in sitting on the board. We've got 4 excellent people now, two from operations, 2 from non-operational staff, who now sit on the board. So they are essentially my eyes and ears in the organisation, understanding how some of what the PSU does, how it's landing, because I really want it to feel different. That is important, because data is one thing and it's incredibly important, but we've actually got to feel that it's making a difference within the organisation, and they will hopefully help me do some of that as well. I also have a co-chair who is another external person, who is a HR director from Oxford University, that is also providing me with support as well. So I feel like we're well resourced. I have very good open dialogue both with the PSU and with Sally as well. And already through some of what I have seen, which I've relayed to Sally and also to the head of the PSU, we're starting to make some changes, and some differences starting to be felt. But we still have some way to go.
Yeah, I mean the main issue that we heard from firefighters was trust. Yes. So you have a way to go, and warm words will not cut it. It is all about action, and the fact that we've had racist firefighters who are still in their jobs, who haven't been dealt with, is a real problem.
Yes, and what I would say as well is that we've already established and agreed at our first board meeting a 10-point plan, and trust is right at the top of that.
Okay, I'm going to be listening to the rest of the questions from the Assembly members, and I'll be coming back to you later. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So this committee published a report, and one of our recommendations was that the LFB's KPIs were assessed at a quarterly rate, and that was going to be published, and it looked like something that was accepted. Then there was a delay to it, and the Secretariat was told that been because there was a request of a review of the KPIs, and this meant the data couldn't be provided. Can you explain why the review was initiated at this stage and what the rationale is for delaying publication of the KPI performance data?
Do you want to come in?
Thank you. So, very much accepted that the committee asked for the KPI data, and it's just really giving some insights to the committee that 1 year into the job, it became very clear to me that the data systems we had were multifaceted. So we didn't have one system when I took over the management of the professional standards unit. And what that meant was that sometimes capturing the data wasn't as straightforward as I would have liked as the Director for People. And that's meant that one of my priorities is to bring in a new case management system called iTrent, where we will have a much more modern day data-driven system, whereas at the moment we've been relying on various systems, which has made it more problematic to sometimes draw on the data. Members will remember that we have 10 KPIs for the PSU that are well socialised, and all of those are being reported on. There's some of them that have been less easy to report upon. So that's me being completely authentic with you. And that being the case was why the driver to get the new case management system. That being said, we have looked at the data and we have been curious about the data, and we've been held to account on the data through our internal boards and mechanisms. And I am able to say to you that the data is showing that there is no disproportionality in that data. What I can also say to the board is that as part of the introduction of the Independent Professional Standards Board, one of the priorities has been to revisit those 10 KPIs and to introduce a new revision to those KPIs that we're going to start from April this year. And we will be reporting quarterly on those, and you will be getting that data from here on in quarterly. So I hope that gives you some assurance, and I want to apologise that the data hasn't been as smooth as I would have liked as the new Director for People, with a number of other priorities in the last year.
Without going into history too much, could you give us a bit of an insight when you said that it was too difficult to capture the data?
Yes.
Like an example of what?
So the example being that we had 4 different systems where the data was stored, and a high turnover of personnel before I got there. So we didn't have very much corporate memory in the PSU when it came to the data. So members will be familiar that we had an interim head of PSU. We then had a vacancy, having gone out to the market and not recruited. So when I started in January 25, there was no permanent head of PSU. I was very pleased to address that by appointing a permanent head of PSU in April. We both prioritised looking at the data and doing a critical data review, and we recognised that the systems, we didn't have the corporate memory, which let us down, which is most unfortunate but unavoidable with 2 new recruits at a senior level. And then as we went through the systems, they weren't where we wanted them to be. So gathering and mining the data amongst a number of other priorities has been less straightforward than one would hope in the modern day. But the new system of iTrent, which I'm pleased to say I've got investment in, and a great deal of people putting their sort of intelligence behind that to get to that stage, has really helped me. So from April, we will have an improved KPIs, which have been to the Independent Professional Standards Board for their scrutiny, and I took 5 to them as my recommendation. We've ended up with 6. So I think it's really healthy that the Independent Professional Standards Board are already giving me that interaction and saying, well, actually, they really wanted one on wellbeing, for example. So I'm pleased to say there will be a KPI on wellbeing, and there will be a KPI on case time, suspension, and all the things that hopefully Assembly members will expect. And I am looking forward to giving you much more real-time information and data as we head into 26-27.
And forgive me, I just want to check one more time, because I think I've not been clear enough in my question, because I can hear how there was difficulty with personnel and there was an interim, and I understand that, so that's settled. But I still don't understand why that changes the data. And what I heard was there were 4 different data sets.
Yes.
But those data sets still exist, no matter who the personnel is.
Yeah. No, absolutely correct. And it's really just been something that we have mined the data, and we have had lots of scrutiny on the data outside of Assembly members as well. So we've had questions, as you would understand, from various ESGs and our equality support groups, just to clarify. And we just haven't had it as smooth as we would like, and real-time information. And because of resource that we've had in the PSU, that's now been addressed. So we've got the right resource now. We've gone from 11 posts when I joined to 16. We've got a dedicated person working on data, which I didn't have. So with a number of priorities, we haven't had the resource. We now have that resource, and we're looking forward to the new system. So those 2 things will address the resource that I've had.
But in the interest of transparency, would it not make sense to publish that data, no matter how difficult it is from 4 data
Yeah.
systems and say in the future we'll be streamlining it to be easier to read rather than not publish it at all?
That would absolutely be that is my ambition going forward, and that will be the pattern of behaviour that members can expect from April 26.
But there's a whole set of data that has been missed, and it sounds like a cover-up, just to name it.
Yeah, no, thank you. That isn't the intention at all, and I can, in all good conscience, say to members there is no intention for that to be the case at all, and the data that we have reviewed has shown no disproportionality. I can give members that assurance. If there is any specific data the members would like, I know through Mayor's questions we've had a number of requests, everything from employment tribunals to other questions relating to the PSU, and we've given that data without hesitation as we are obligated to do. But if there is any data that members particularly would like me to retrospectively provide you with, then of course I'll be committed to doing that.
Thanks, I appreciate that commitment. Naram, what is your assessment of LFB's actions to address this in the past 12, 18 months? And since taking on your role, have you recommended any changes?
Is this around data specifically?
Exactly.
Yeah. So
the KPIs.
The KPIs. So Sally will tell you it's absolutely up there. I cannot do my job in terms of scrutiny if I don't have the data in place. So one of the things that the board is doing, as Sally is quite has already said, is the first thing we did was look at the new set of KPIs in comparison to the previous set of KPIs, ensuring that they are correct, ensuring that they will give us the openness and transparency in terms of kind of what we need to monitor the performance of the PSU across the organisation. And I feel confident that the new set of KPIs, which we're happy to share, will absolutely do that. They are not too dissimilar to the previous ones, but just very much clearer in terms of language and everything else. The second thing is that we are monitoring as the board the rollout of iTrent and the new system. So paying really close attention and ensuring that we have scrutiny around kind of the rollout of that to make sure that it's hitting the timelines that it's set out to do. So what I would say is yes, absolutely, I am wholly committed to ensuring that there is transparency around the data, and really looking forward to the first set that we have where we can kind of do some proper scrutiny around that.
Thank you. And Sally, we've had reports about the amount of higher volume of cases than the PSU has the capacity to process. Can I ask if this is true and what's being done about it?
Thank you. So it's accurate to state that we have got some inherited cases that go back a while as well. So it's not just the things that have happened in 2025. But as we sit here today, we do, with 6,000 employees and the complexity that the Commissioners referred to earlier, we do have at the moment over 40 disciplinary cases and over 80 grievance cases. So in terms of the volume, members can take away from that the scope and scale of what we're dealing with. The resources when I joined the PSU, as I've already alluded to this morning, we had 11 staff, very committed, but not necessarily allocated to do the work that I needed them to do to get the best kind of flow of work. So that's been something that I've paid close attention to, along with the head of PSU, throughout 2025. And as we head into 2026, we've now got a case manager, so someone who is absolutely on it, and that's really helping us with the flow of cases. And I'm very dependent to keep cases moving on representative bodies, and I'd like to thank the representative bodies this morning, if I may, for their patience while we've been working through the resource allocation in the PSU for the past year. But the case volume is high. It is high, and that's because we are doing the right thing, not the easy thing. So I've introduced a new vision for people services, and that is doing the right thing, not the easy thing. That will mean that we do take anything that comes our way very seriously and make sure that we are dealing with it most thoroughly and most robustly. And sometimes cases can take longer than we would like. The average time a case is taking is just under 6 months. In my previous Director of HR experience, I would like it to be slightly lower, and that's something that I'm expecting the Independent Professional Standards Board to hold me to account on. And when it comes to the case duration, we do have a range of dependencies. Some of our cases are caught up with the criminal justice system, and they're outside of our control. So the reason we've got a case is not because of anything that happened in London Fire Brigade, but it's something that happened outside of the workplace. So all of these factors can take time and add to the case duration, but we're very keen to keep it as efficient as we possibly can and as humane as we possibly can. So at the first Independent Professional Standard Board, I was asked what my priority is, and I made it very clear that this needs to be human-centred.
Thank you. Assembly Member Bukhari.
Sally and Erin, I'm going to ask a little bit more about the review of cases. One of the committee recommendations was that the PSU should carry out a review of cases, and it considers that was escalated above a level of severity, and to use this to inform the training of middle managers to reduce the number of cases that were inappropriately escalated. So how has this recommendation been addressed?
Yeah. So thank you. So first of all, if I may, I'll deal with the training. So the Commissioner has already alluded to this morning the absolute critical imperative of good leadership. And that's generalisable to both the recommendations from Action and Assembly and also the HMI 7 areas for improvement. And in there, leadership is the thread that runs through it. And what I recognised in my early time at London Fire Brigade is we didn't necessarily have a mandatory solution for leadership to give people the skills they need to have difficult conversations. And I'm very pleased to say that we introduced a foundational management training, one day mandatory, from the summer. And we co-created it with the equality support groups, rep bodies, various people, managers on the ground, staff, got what would be really relevant to you. So we did a very big, deep inquiry into what would be relevant. And the foundational management course was trialled in the summer. It was very successful, and it's continued to get very good evaluations. And it covers just the things that we need: performance management, having a difficult conversation, managing any sickness, managing any causes for concern, recognising any protected characteristics and how you can best support colleagues. So it covers all of the basics of what does good leadership look like in London Fire Brigade. We've had 450 managers go through that training, with more to come. And it is mandatory, which I think is important, because what we don't want is to get people there that are, already get this. We want everybody to go to this training so that we get the highest level of leadership and management in London Fire Brigade. This will help us a great deal. It's too early to say the impact it's having on the work of the PSU, but we are hoping it will yield some benefits as we go forward. When it comes to the cases and the historic cases, we have not done a deep inquiry into whether or not, historically, whether or not cases were given at the right level. What we have done, though, members will remember, is that the HMI did command every fire service across the country to do a 5-year historical case review. We've done that, as has every fire station up and down the country. But looking forward, I've already mentioned today that we have got a case manager in the PSU. This is significant because the case manager will be making sure that we've got consistency and that we've got that real handle on any case that's going through the PSU to make sure that we haven't put the allegations and we're getting the allegations at the right level of according to the Grey Book policy and other policies we have. So I hope that gives the member some assurance on what we're doing to make sure that everything we go through the PSU is done to the highest standards.
How are you measuring the success, Naran?
So Sally and I have spoken about this in some detail, and I'm really pleased that there is now this kind of foundational course that exists for managers, because they are absolutely key to the success of, in terms of culture change. The managers are absolutely a key part of all of that. One of the things that we will be looking at and monitoring going forward are looking at kind of some of the stage 1, stage 2 cases and seeing how many of those convert into kind of more serious cases, because then we have an issue. And as you'll know, one of the things that is absolutely critical and important for any organisation is that when poor behaviour is tackled right at the very start of it, and managers are not shying away from it, it means that you will have much less serious cases. I want us to get to a point where the PSU is dealing with the utmost serious cases within the organisation, and not the outcome of what should have been a manager's decision at stage 1 and stage 2.
How are you dealing with the historic cases? Because I'm aware of many emails that you and I have both been copied into, but I would like to know how you're going to go deal with those going forward.
So one of the things that I'm very, very clear about is that I will not be getting involved in the decision making around individual cases. That is not my role. My role here is to scrutinise the performance of the professional standards unit. One of the things that I will do is we will review kind of outcome of cases. That's not to reverse decisions, but that is to ensure that there is consistency in decision making going forward. Now, in terms of the historical cases, when people have written to me, I have been really clear about what my role is within this, and what I need to happen is for those historical cases to go through the system and go through the process and come to a conclusion. I know some of them have been taking a long time, and that is I have spoken to the head of the PSU about this, and monitoring the kind of length of time that it's taking, and hoping that we will conclude some of those cases now that we've got a strengthened team, and to be able to kind of come to a conclusion for the people involved in that as well.
There's some very traumatic cases, and those have been highlighted by the Nazir Afzal review, and there's been no action.
Yeah, and so
literally nothing.
I am confident at this time, and it is something that I will continue to monitor, that those cases will come to a conclusion. But I am also aware of the length of time that it has taken, and time is, as I said about in terms of my plan and the things that I will hold the PSU to account for, is the time it is taking to get through those cases.
What about your role in terms of what is in the public domain on social media? Will you have any review or role in dealing with that? There are social media accounts by some firefighters that are explicitly racist that I've seen. Have you dealt with that, and are you going to deal with that?
So at this time, it's not currently on my agenda. But what I would say about that is that if those result in disciplinary and grievance cases, then yes, that is absolutely within my remit, because that is about the performance of the PSU. Now, there is wide scrutiny that will happen, but that very much sits within Sally's remit.
It'd be good to have a meeting with you at some point. Is that something that we could arrange? Because I think there's a lot of cases that I've been having to deal with. I'm sure Assembly members get emails from firefighters all the time, and some of them are quite sensitive, but I just want to see a conclusion, because I can't bear the fact that there are people who have been going through such hideous, disgusting, racist behaviour, and having to sit back and see nothing happen to, those individuals have gone through some really traumatic experiences, and nobody's been held to account. It is disgusting.
I'm really happy to meet with you.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to echo what Assembly Member Bukhari is saying there, so it's good to hear that commitment. Sally, can I just return to KPIs again? I'm sorry. Two quick things. So there's 6 new KPIs. Are you happy to share those with the committee?
Of course, and that was our intention.
And then my understanding is the committee, to repeat our conversation before, the committee had asked several times for the previous KPI data, and we were told that wasn't available because of the review. But now I've heard you say today that you're happy to share with us anything in the interest of transparency. Will you now share the data from those previous 10 KPIs?
Yeah, so let me, please may I take that outside of the Assembly meeting, but the commitment of what we've got I will share with you, of course.
Can you repeat that again? Sorry.
Yeah, so the 10 KPIs, the data we have, I'll make a commitment to sharing what data we have with you.
Great, thank you. And Assembly Member Hall.
Thank you. First of all, Jonathan, congratulations on those figures earlier. Very encouraging, so I'm pleased about that. I've got a couple of questions. I'm afraid they're nothing to do with culture, but they're questions that I'm interested in. Staff sickness is at 7.2%, which is just over 25% higher than the LFB's 5.75 target. So what needs to be done, or what are you doing to try? I mean, I've often asked this over the years. What are you trying to? How are you trying to reduce that?
Yes, we do have a relentless focus on our sickness at the moment, Assembly Member Hall, because it's key to our ongoing improvement as an organisation. Now, there's some structural issues that we've had to wrestle with post-COVID, which we're not the only organisation that's been dealing with that. Actually, if you look at trends across other public and private sector organisations post-COVID, we've seen an upward trend, particularly in terms of long-term sickness. Now, we've had a real focus on it over the course of the last 2 years, and we are now starting to see long-term sickness in particular start to come down. It's still too slow. I still need to see more progress because it has huge impacts on those individuals, but of course it also has an economic impact on the organisation and, of course, the availability of fire appliances to be crewed in the way that we need them to be crewed. So we do have an absence management panel which is chaired by the Deputy Commissioner, which is looking at ways that we can deal with particularly individual cases, because some of these cases are quite complicated. And there's been a relentless focus on some of the longer-term cases and we're starting to see that come down now. So we're starting to see long-term sickness, in particular, come down. We've got to be relentless about that. But there's also some structural issues that we're wrestling with. So blockages within the National Health Service at the moment, particularly to deal with musculoskeletal injuries and actually people being able to see a GP as quickly as we would like them to and indeed receive the treatment that they need to. That all plays into the length of time that they're off duty, and we're looking at ways to see how we can try and bring people back to work through our new occupational health provider, because they're the ones who ultimately make the decision. So a GP can give a view on what they think, but it's actually our occupational health provider who are then able to take that viewpoint and then decide how quickly we can bring people back to work. But we are focused on long-term sickness. We're now starting to see that come down. We've got to keep coming back to it, but there are some large-scale structural issues that make it challenging. And then, of course, we've got the impact of stress, anxiety and depression. And the figures there, again, this is a post-COVID element that we've seen across other public sector organisations where that started to go up. This committee actually had a long period looking at health and wellbeing, and with the likes of Dean Corney and others who came and presented evidence, our mental health offer now is much better than it was previously. And we want to see those figures come down. But it is a real focus for us, Assembly Member Hall, because we just need to see those numbers come down.
Yeah, it's been a long-term thing. And the other thing that we used to pick up whenever we looked at it, that sickness really rises in school holidays. Is that still the case?
You do see seasonal variations in the sickness figures, and again, that's where this point I was talking about leadership right at the start in my opening conversation, and again, the management course that Sally was referring to make sure that our junior leaders in particular really do know how to manage sickness and absence properly, how to have difficult conversations, and we want to see that consistency. But you're right, we do see seasonal spikes in those sickness figures.
Yeah, and always have. That's a problem. Are you happy with the current amount of overtime that you're seeing?
Well, actually, our overtime, so particularly around pre-arranged overtime, we've seen those numbers come down significantly over the last 3 to 4 years. So there was a point when I was Deputy Commissioner for Operations before this role, and when I first started that, where we were spending close to £40 million a year on overtime. At the moment, we look as if we're on schedule in our overarching overtime figures to be around £6 million. So there are significant reductions in both pre-arranged overtime and other elements of overtime, and we've committed to that as part of our budget management moving forward. So we want to see that. But we're always going to require overtime. That will always be a tool that we'll need to draw upon to make sure we've got pumping appliances in particular on the run. But actually, if you look at our figures over the last 3 to 4 years, we've seen significant reductions, particularly around pre-arranged overtime, and long may that continue.
Have you looked at a financial model of having more firefighters? Because if you did, perhaps then when people wanted holiday on school holiday times, if you had more staff, that could be accommodated better.
Well, one of the structural challenges we're still wrestling with post-COVID was the gap in terms of our average vacancy margin between full establishment and what we've currently got. Now, at its zenith post-COVID, where we had a freeze on recruitment, we saw that get close to 400 between full establishment and what our actual figures are. The latest figures are around the 140, 150 mark, and that's actually how we get there, is we've got to get as close as we possibly can to full establishment, excepting you never get to full establishment unless you over-established for a whole host of reasons. So we're making sure we're bringing more people into the organisation. That figure is coming closer, where the average vacancy margin and our establishment levels are as close as they possibly can be, and then that will have an impact on the numbers of firefighters we've got available, as well as driving down particularly long-term sickness, so we've got more people available. So it's a combination of all of those things.
Yeah.
There's no one silver bullet that resolves the issue.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. At this point, I want to say thank you very much to Sally and Niran. Thank you very much for joining us. I won't take a break now, if that's okay. I'll try and find a break later on, but I think we should proceed. Excellent. In which case, Assemblymember Bukhari.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. This is another big area that Jonathan and I have been talking about for a long time now, which is about e-bikes and lithium-ion batteries. Jonathan, you've been calling on the government to bring forward consultation on secondary legislation to improve product safety. How is the LFB updating its approach to tackling the growing number of lithium-ion battery fires ahead of this? And what impact would the secondary legislation have on the overall number of lithium-ion battery fires the LFB deals with?
Well, you're quite right, Assemblymember Bakari. This is something that we've been lobbying very heavily on, and the Product Regulation and Metrology Act received royal assent last year, and we now need to see that secondary legislation. I have spoken at length to the Fire Minister to want to see that secondary legislation come forward. Deputy Commissioner Sutcliffe actually had a meeting with Kate Dearden, who's a Minister within Business and Trade, again to hammer home the point that we want to see this secondary legislation and the subsequent guidance come forward as quickly as possible. And I'm very grateful for the support this committee has provided us in making that lobbying effort to government, because to answer your second question, with that regulation coming in place, making sure that the industry is regulated, particularly online, we want to see the numbers of e-bike and e-scooter fires in particular come down. You know, the statistics are extraordinary when you look at it. So in 2020, I think we dealt with 20 e-bike or e-scooter fires. Last year, we were in excess of 200. So you've seen that trajectory of travel over the last 5 years in particular, and you know we know that this is going to be an ongoing theme, so it needs to be regulated properly. The online world needs to be regulated properly. We need to make sure that where people are using this technology, and of course we want people to use the technology, but it needs to be done safely. But we really do want to see this secondary legislation and the subsequent guidance which will help us do that, because prevention, as always, is better than cure. We want to stop these fires from occurring in the first place, and proper regulation is a key part to that. We should then start to see those figures at least plateau before starting to see them come down.
Prevention and public awareness, because that's something that you and I have both been talking about. The other question I wanted to ask you, linked to this, which I raised with you last time we spoke, it was about Sophia Durata, who tragically died. First person to die from a converted e-bike in an HMO in Old Kent Road. At the time, you said that you needed to check on whether the HMO licence had been issued with a valid fire risk assessment. So have you done that? And can you confirm the answer of that today?
So I have asked the questions around, because that's currently being subject to discussion. And I'm sure you're aware, Assemblymember Bakari, there is an ongoing investigation that we're looking into the entire case. I've asked for that full report to be on my desk. I still haven't received that.
And
once I've
will
got that,
we see sight of that
we will
too?
be able to see that, and I'm more than happy to have that discussion with you.
Okay, great.
Offline.
And on that issue of HMOs, I'd like to know how widespread the problem you think it is across London boroughs. That HMO licensing processing don't have fire risk assessments completed. What would be your assessment of that?
Well, I think at the moment, in terms of how HMOs are regulated, obviously we're not the deciding agency within that space. That very much sits within the local authority. Now, our fire protection teams work very, very closely with local authorities to make sure that HMOs in particular are regulated in the right way. But as you know, Assemblymember Bakari, the London built environment and HMOs within is a complicated space. And our fire protection teams have lots and lots of competing demands on their time, both in terms of working with the building safety regulator, working with local borough councils, and of course anything we can do to help manage the areas of HMOs. But what we will see is that if we start to see trends, if we start to see areas where we've got real concerns, then we, as always, we will put our shoulder to the wheel to see what more we can do to make HMOs as safe as they possibly can be.
Okay, great, thank you. And just my last question on this, that we saw a horrifying fire in Glasgow city centre in a vape shop, which required, I believe, about 250 firefighters to attend. And the scale of the incident highlights just the risk of lithium batteries generally. I appreciate the investigation is still underway into the incident, but I'd like to know what your key takeaways are from the incident at the moment, and specifically around any lessons that incidents like this that the brigade is already considering in terms of prevention and preparedness.
That's a really good question, Assemblymember Bakari, because I am very concerned about vape shots, and I think, as you say, the investigation into what happened in Glasgow is still underway, so it'd be inappropriate for me to make a specific comment on that. However, we will have thousands and thousands of premises across London that are selling e-cigarettes and vapes that we need to be fully aware of. I have asked Deputy Commissioner Sutcliffe to carry out a quick review on our position, both in terms of what we're doing around regulation and what we know in terms of the current environment within London. There will also be an ops improvement note going out to crews as well, just to make sure that when we're attending these incidents, we're aware of the particular risks that come with vapes and these mini lithium-ion batteries that are contained within these e-cigarettes. But I think the fire in Glasgow will be one of those moments again for the sector to think about again. I mean, I've said this on numerous occasions, the way risk is continuing to develop, both in London and across the UK. And I think what this will highlight when the report actually comes forward is that we're going to need to do more work around making sure that they're regulated properly, which absolutely has to be the case, and then indeed our role in that space, and then how we make sure we've got the operational capability to deal with these fires when they arise. So I'm looking forward to seeing what that report comes back with. If there's more we need to do as a brigade, both in terms of our protection and regulatory role as well as our operational role, we will absolutely do that.
I mean, how are you going to monitor the amount of vape shops that are, because it's probably one of the most common shops that I'm seeing now that are popping up. Is there a way of dealing with that?
There'll be hundreds of thousands of premises, and one of the challenges, of course, is some will be perfectly well regulated and actually have got the proper structures in place, you know, the compartmentalisation, the proper cabinets, they'll be stored properly and it'll be managed in the right way. But we will know there'll be many others where we don't know whether or not they're selling e-vapes and e-cigarettes in particular. So there's a huge piece of work. It's why the local approach with our borough risk management plans and the fire safety checks that our local crews do is the way that we actually help manage this, because they will have the local intelligence, they will know what the local picture looks like. That needs to be fed back into us corporately, and if there's more we then need to do to make sure it's regulated properly, then we will absolutely do that.
Those emerging issues are still emerging, aren't they?
They are still emerging.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Assemblymember Hall.
Thank you. Have you actually asked TfL or the Met to assist or to do anything to help to push back against the bikes or indeed the vape shops? Have you actually asked for any help?
No, not yet, Assemblymember Hall, in terms of specific requests to the Met Police or TfL around vape shops or e-cigarettes and e-vapes. But no, more than happy to take that away and have that discussion.
Okay, that'd be interesting to see. I mean, obviously, you must be concerned about the firefighters' exposure to these contaminants, and it is getting worse, it would appear. What steps are you actually taking to address this danger new danger that they're now in?
Is this specifically to do with e-cigarettes?
It's really the e-bikes, but it's that contaminants.
Well, contaminants more broadly, which of course this committee took a very keen interest in, and I'm very grateful for the report that's come forward and the 8 recommendations which we will be writing back to you. It should be with you either today or tomorrow in terms of our response, looking at those recommendations. This is a key priority, Assemblymember Hall. We need to make sure we're protecting our frontline staff and firefighters in particular against these new and emerging risks. You know, what we now know about contaminants and exposure and what that means to cancer risk and a whole range of other health issues means we have to be as vigilant as we can be and introducing new things if we can. So I was up in Scotland 3-4 weeks ago now looking at the new PPE trials. So we had 20 London firefighters up in Scotland testing out new PPE. Its ability to deal with contaminants is a key part of the framework that's being used to assess which PPE we will be looking to bring forward. I'm expecting to see the outcome of those trials in May, and then we'll be able to make purchasing decisions around what new PPE we need to bring on board to protect our firefighters, because this contaminants issue is key. There's a lot of it is cultural though. So making sure firefighters are cleaning properly, they're showering when they get back to station, that crews are being recycled quickly when they get to particular incidents. So our incident commanders now factor in the recycling of fire crews through as quickly as possible to make sure that once you have been exposed, you're able to be removed from the scene and then take the appropriate action. We've got new policy and procedure. I know members from this committee have been and seen how that looks on fire stations. I think there will still be more we can do to make sure we're protecting firefighters as much as we can, but it's a key priority for the organisation.
Okay. When you're looking at new uniforms, etc., will you please bear in mind women every time I've spoken to them. They're all one size fits all, and of course we're not all the same shape.
So that's actually a really, really key point. So the PPE trials that were up there, we made sure that we had a real mix of firefighters going up to Scotland to test it, because everybody deserves to have uniform that fits appropriately and is designed for their body type and shape. So that will absolutely be a key component of the judging criteria that's being used to see what uniform goes on the framework, because you're right, it's unacceptable if people have not got the correct
Good to
PPE
hear.
uniform.
Thank you. Thank you, Johnson.
Assemblyman McClark.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Just on that, I mean, one of the things that really came out while we were visiting fire stations, while we were looking at contaminants, was how much awareness there is of cancers, of what how firefighters can protect themselves from contaminants, but also a general concern, from some firefighters about how their previous behaviour, when they didn't know about the dangers of chemicals, how they didn't necessarily wash after every fire. They didn't necessarily go home as a clean person, and now their behaviour has changed. But of course, that concern remains about those chemicals and the potential risk of developing a cancer. One thing that was also really interesting, though, was when we were speaking with experts that there's inconsistencies with testing and screening for cancers, and that going into that investigation, I think probably most of us thought, well, of course you screen for everything, and it turns out the answer is much more complicated. But what is the LFB's plan for cancer screening for firefighters?
No, that is a really, really key question, because I am keen that we bring in some form of cancer screening. The difficulty, as you've alluded to, Assembly Member Clark, is that there is no one test that covers all of, I think there's over 200 types of cancers that we would be able to use. That just is not available. But what we do know is that firefighting as a profession seems to have indices that I think it's 4 times more likely to develop cancer at a later stage than members of the public. And we need to understand that, and it's still difficult to get the real analysis of some of the research that's been done, which again, in response to this committee's report, is something that we really want to do, to see more research to understand, what is it that's driving the increased risk of cancer in firefighters. Contaminants, I've got no doubt, will be a role, but there will also be all sorts of things around shift patterns, around lifestyle, around smoking, the propensity to smoke. There will be a whole range of lifestyle factors, as well as the issue around contaminants that we need to factor in. But trying to find some form of cancer screening that we would be able to introduce into our medicals at the moment is tricky. We are having a discussion with the National Fire Chiefs, because this is obviously a national and international problem, having conversations with the National Fire Chiefs Council to see what more we can do to have some form of screening, which I'm really, really keen to see, some naked self-interest. The truth be told, Assembly Member Clark, I know the exposure that I had when I was a firefighter and a flexi-duty officer. I look back on what we used to do with horror, the truth be told, knowing what we know now. And our responsibility to firefighters, both past, present and future, is key, but trying to find a cancer screening program that's going to work for us as a sector at the moment is difficult, because there isn't one single screening process that we would be able to use. But I think there will be elements we can bring in, because there are certain types of cancer that I think we've got more exposure to that may be the option in terms of bringing in what that screening program looks like. But this is a national issue that we're working with the NFCC to try and resolve.
And just on that, I mean, given that you have a specific cohort of people, is there a program you can work with to develop alongside the NHS or perhaps an international medical body? Is there any work being done to look specifically at the exposures of firefighters, either nationally or internationally?
So there is a lot of work that's going on through the auspices of the National Fire Chiefs Council on this, because we know we need a national solution to this. This isn't something that London Fire Brigade can resolve in isolation. There has to be a national solution. To be fair to the Fire Brigades Union as well, they have done an awful lot of work around contaminants and actually made a number of recommendations that they want to see the National Fire Chiefs Council push, all of which I'm very open to. But we need to do it consistently. We need to understand what types of changes we would need to make within the LFB, but it needs to come through the National Fire Chiefs Council, including what screening looks like, what additional contaminant measures we can take, whether it's the PPE, whether it's how we manage our fire stations and how they're organised. There's a whole range of different things, again, there's not one silver bullet that resolves this. But a lot of it is actually cultural. A lot of what you can do to protect yourself is actually lead a safe and healthy life, encourage people to do physical fitness. That's why we've brought back the annual fitness testing, and that's now being rigorously applied. I've got to do mine in 2 weeks' time, I think it is. But that's absolutely right, because we need people to be fit and healthy when they come to work. We need to provide as much advice as we can to protect firefighters in particular, and then we need to give structural protections as well, whether it's PPE, whether it's how the fire stations are managed, whether it's the cleaning regime that we've got in place, appropriate showering facilities, a whole range of different things. But this is a key priority, not only for the London Fire Brigade, but the sector more broadly.
Thank you, and good luck with your fitness test. I'm sure you'll be fine. Assembly Member Tyrrell.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, Jonathan and Jules. Jonathan, no, Jules, I'm going to start with. You've been strangely quiet, so I'll let you go first. But spoiler alert, it's the same question to both of you. Are the government's regulations for residential personal emergency evacuation plans fit for purpose?
Well, obviously, it's absolutely vital that disabled residents have a plan put in place that supports them to evacuate safely. That's a given. The government's commitment to introducing residential PEEPs from April this year is a welcome step forward, and I know the GLA and in terms of the housing team and the LFB are working together to make sure responsible persons are aware of the new legal duties. The Mayor's obviously continue calling for future legislation and guidance to go further, and for the measures to cover all buildings, covered by the fire safety order. Certainly, there's issues as well that this bleeds across to fire evacuation and what we're calling for in terms of the building regs, and also temporarily within the London plan until the building regs are correct. Fit for purpose.
Our response actually to the consultation is actually publicly available, and we very much welcome the legislation, very much welcome this as a first step in terms of making sure we have equity of rescue and response to our disabled communities. So we very much welcome that, but we do see this as a first step. So one of the things we are keen to see is how does this now move forward, particularly looking at other areas like care homes that we would also like to see included in the legislation. So we think this is a good first step. Obviously, it goes live from the 4th of April this year. There's been a lot of work that's been done, both within the sector and externally, to make sure that responsible persons are aware of their responsibilities under the legislation. But I think the fact that fire crews, when they respond to high-rise buildings now that have got disabled residents, will have access to that information in the premise information box and indeed on our mobile data terminals, so that we can plan that into our rescue, is a big step forward. But we're ambitious about this, and I think there will be other elements as the legislation lands that we will also want to see included, and a particular one would be things like care homes included in the legislation moving forward, but a welcome first step.
Perfect. Thank you for that, and that means I don't have to ask the second question. You'll be pleased here. So, in your opinions, is the building safety regulators' remit fit for purpose? I'll start with, and then go to Jules.
Well, the building safety regulator is obviously an evolving piece, and as this committee will know, there's been a change of leadership there. From persons not a million miles away from this parish, dare I say. And I met with both Andy and Charlie last week in terms of the ongoing support that we want to provide, both specifically London Fire Brigade, but also the fire sector, to the building standards regulator. Now, it's had difficulties. There's no doubt about that. There have been blockages in the process. We've seen delays for developers, which has caused significant frustration. And the key thing for us is we obviously want to see good quality housing built. I think that's something that we would all welcome, but it obviously can't be at the expense of safety. I am really actually pleased to see the progress that's now being made in the BSR. I think it is now driving in the right direction. I think there's still an awful lot of work it needs to do. There are still backlogs that need to be cleared. But the relationship between the BSR and fire and rescue, as you would expect now with Andy and Charlie in the positions that they're in, has significantly improved, and I think that is to be welcomed. One of the things I've asked for going forward is real clarity in terms of what the BSR see the role of fire and rescue services is moving forward, because obviously we've got competing demands with our fire protection teams. We're having to look at a lot of different areas, including the BSR. 70% of the BSR's remit sits within the M25, so we've obviously got a clear commitment to make sure that we're involved in it. So I think more clarity in terms of the role of fire vis-à-vis the BSR would be welcome, to make sure I can then posture our protection department accordingly to make sure we're able to meet that. But in terms of a trajectory of travel for the BSR and moving towards having one single regulator, which I think is absolutely the right direction of travel, I can see there has been improvements in recent months, and long may that continue.
Anything to add to that, Jules?
Just that it was really welcome that the government took action, moving the regulator across to CLG, putting all the sort of related areas together under the same government department. The appointment obviously was a good one. I don't think that there's been a pushover, though. They're not just letting things through just to speed the process up. They're still being rigorous in what they're doing. And actually, there's been some welcome admission from some developers that actually there was fault on both sides. But clearly the bulk of the problem was with simply the processes and bureaucracy, lack of resource at the BSR. I think Andy and Charlie are making a lot of good progress. There was a number of developers have said to me that not only have they achieved stage 2 within the 12-week period, they've particularly commented on the communication. There was a whole period where, a year could pass, no communication from the BSR to the developer, and then just receiving a fail notice and not even really understanding, not clear as to why one had failed, and you were just sent round the process again. Obviously, nobody learning anything. But the anecdotal evidence from the development sector is that is changing, and people are getting engaged and are now faced with a more responsive service. So there's facilitating improvement all round.
Thank you for that answer. That kind of picks up on my final question, picks on something you've just said about the rejection, which is, would you support, from a fire safety perspective, the introduction of a pre-application process to the BSR?
Yeah, and I think they're actually actively considering it, because it's something that we suggested that they should do. And obviously it's resources and putting some charging mechanism in place, and also key, finding the people to staff such a thing which is a struggle we all find, whether it's councils with building safety people, the fire service inspections across the board. It's we need to attract more people into this area.
Yeah, I mean, just to build on that point, the Deputy Mayor has said, finding enough registered building inspectors, our own fire engineer capability to make sure that we've got enough sector competent personnel to meet the demands of the BSR and elsewhere is key. A pre-application, I do know the BSR are looking at that, but again, we'll have to resource it properly. But the more we can do upstream to build in building safety and fire safety specifically before we get to the actual building stage, the better. So I would be keen to see that develop, but of course it's going to come with the caveats around resourcing and make sure we get that right.
Assembly Member Bukhari.
Thank you. Interesting, Jonathan, that you said it was a good first step. That's what people say in public when they mean a lot more to do. So I'm going to dig in a little bit further about what more we need to do. In terms of whether it's fit for purpose or not, the Commissioner, I know you've been saying that I know that you are working with the disabled, deaf and disabled organisations like Inclusion London, for example. They've given us a brief as well already to all committee members here. So we're fully aware of their concerns, that they're saying that this is a watered-down version of what Grenfell Inquiry recommended in the first place. you may also have seen that I led on a motion that passed expressing the similar concerns about the effectiveness of the legislations. Do you share those concerns that the limitations and the loopholes in the legislation will mean that many disabled residents still won't have a PEEP in place? And what operational implications will this have for the London Fire Brigade?
Well, the point I would make is that when I say it's an important first step, it is absolutely an important first step, because we're moving from a position where we didn't have these to now at least we've actually got some form of risk assessment. Because what I would expect to see happen is there'll be more people-centred risk assessments of disabled residents in high-rise buildings in particular, and that's something we just simply don't have at the moment. So from that perspective, to go from a position of not having that to having that, I absolutely welcome. Are there going to be some additional elements we would want to see once we see how this legislation actually works in practice? I've got no doubt there will be, and we will be relentless about that. I mean, I was at our community forum last week, and there was a presentation there by a member of our fire protection team looking at our PEEPs, and we've got disabled members within that community forum who were asking brilliant questions about how this is going to work. Some of this, honest Assembly Member Bakari, we won't know until we actually see it tested on the ground physically.
Yeah.
But I was always said, if there is more that we need to do, and if we need to lobby government to see further strengthening around the legislation, we will absolutely do that. As I say, I think there are key areas like care homes that I would want to see included in the legislation. But I think making an important first step is actually key, and then that gives us a baseline that we can then build on. But the views of the disabled community in particular have to help guide us in terms of how we take that forward. And we're going to have to see how this works operationally. You know, when our crews are attending these incidents, having access to the information in the premise information box and indeed on our mobile data terminal, how that then transcends into the rescue operations that take place and how it informs the strategy. Some of that we're going to have to see play out, which is why we've done a number of watch briefings. It's why it's now been included in our high-rise training, that we include our PEEP's response into our high-rise training. We're just going to have to see how that plays out. But just to be very, very clear, if there's improvements we want to see, we will lobby hard to make sure that they're in, because we want to see equity of rescue across the whole of London.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that Inclusion London has briefed us all on is the fact that they feel as if the lessons from Grenfell are not being learnt, particularly on the issue of the height as an arbitrary concept for planning safety, fire safety. Are you concerned that the government's decision to restrict eligibility to disabled residents living in high-rise flat buildings and medium-rise buildings is in a simultaneous evacuation strategy?
Well, one of the things we said in our consultation is exactly that, that we can't just look at height as being a risk factor. Yes, it is a risk factor, but there's a whole range of other indices that we would also want to see included. But I think this is an important first step, and if there are other additional elements that we need to build in there that are not just using height as the judgment criteria for risk, then we will absolutely push to see that forward. So I think that's a fair comment, and I would like to see that. As I say, again, things like care homes you would naturally think should form part of that legislation moving forward, and we'll keep saying that, and we'll keep seeing how this develops over time.
Are you concerned that disabled residents will be protected only if they pay for fire safety measures themselves as well? Is that a concern that you've...
No, that's not something that I've been specifically alerted to. What I would expect to see happen is the responsible persons have got very, very clear guidance that was issued in December last year around their responsibilities under the RPEEPs legislation. I would expect to see more people-centred risk assessments done as a result of that legislation, and then the appropriate evacuation plans put in place, and making sure that responsible persons really do understand their responsibilities underneath this legislation. I mean, but that specific point, no, I've not been alerted to that.
There is also concerns about the responsible persons and the wording in the legislation about reasonable endeavours rather than best endeavours. I mean, are you concerned by that as well, the lack of clarity in there?
Well, again, I think we're going to have to see how this plays out practically, and if we do think that things need to be tightened up, if the wording in the legislation needs to be tightened to deliver a better outcome, then we will again continue to lobby in that part. But I can't stress enough how important it is that we've got this first step, and then we need to build from here. But will there be things that we think we need to include moving forward to make the legislation better than it currently is? Without doubt, as there always is with this type of thing.
Jules, as I mentioned, we passed a motion calling on the Mayor to write to the government urging them to reconsider the regulations. What conversations have you been having with the government about those specific changes that we pushed in the motion?
Sorry to be unhelpful, but I haven't. That would be Tom, because he covers residential building safety. In my area, though, things that I have been pushing for is, as a result of the publication of the MPPF, we were disappointed that there's a move to prevent us being able to putting in fire safety issues into the plan. I mean, we're not seeking to, diverge from a planning document including building safety issues, but whilst the sort of building regs are inadequate, we are keen that we do include them. And I think the two gaps at the moment, one is evacuation lifts. We're hoping that we can have insist on evacuation lifts at all heights, because again, this is another area where heights are being arbitrarily used to determine whether the policy applies or not. Above, I think, is 18 metres. Nationally would require an evacuation lift, but below that it doesn't. And we wouldn't be able to impose that on based on that same area of policy. We are hopeful that we'll be able to impose it through design and accessibility. It seems mad that you can mandate accessibility, but you can't mandate egressability. So hopefully we're looking to do that. The other issue is about combustibility in walls as well. Again, it seems that something that's 3 or 4 stories, it's fine to use combustible materials in walls, but higher than 18 metres, it isn't. Well, I think it should be all the way down to the ground, frankly. So those are areas that I'm actively involved in pushing for, and we will challenge the process through developing the London plan. But I'm afraid it's Tom on PEEPs.
Okay. Last question to you, Commissioner. You kind of alluded to the need to kind of keep things in review. One of the suggestions actually from some of the Labour colleagues during the motion last month was that we should review how the regulations are working once they've been put in place for after a few months. So I'd like to know whether you're able to commit to holding a dedicated session around October time, perhaps through the London Fire Brigade Community Forum, which you've talked about, to review how the regulations are working in practice and invite us, the Assembly members, to attend so that we can hear those conversations and see how it is working in practice.
I'm more than happy to give that
Great.
commitment. Absolutely, yeah, and we will look to do that and work with the committee to make sure that that's
Fantastic. Let's get that in the diary.
No problem at all.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Before I hand over to Assemblymember Clark, I just want to do 2 things, which first of all is to welcome the school council from Heritage Primary School in Tower Hamlets. Welcome, guys. We're asking questions right now to the London Fire Commissioner, who's in charge of the London Fire Brigade, and one of the deputy mayors for London. So very, very welcome. I just want to come back to this point, Commissioner, around the difference between a reasonable endeavour and a best endeavour, because I do find it really concerning. Surely a reasonable endeavour would only be the best endeavour if we're talking about the life of a disabled person.
Well, again, without getting drawn into the actual wording within the legislation, the key thing for me, Chair, is how this actually plays out practically, which is why we do need to see the legislation come forward and then be enacted and then understand what it's actually driving in terms of behaviours, what we're seeing from responsible persons, and indeed what it means for us operationally. The key thing is that we now do have this starting point, but again, if we need to make changes, including in the wording to be even more pointy-elbowed, if I could put it that way, if that's required, then that's fine. We would have a look at it, but I think we've got to see how the legislation plays out practically and then make some informed decisions. And again, this may well be something we would come on to in the session that we've just agreed to in October later this year.
I think that I can understand that it's absolutely not your place to get dragged into a political argument, and so let's put that aside. But it does feel like there's a role for leadership here, and for you as London Fire Commissioner to know that disabled people are worried that a responsible person, when making a personal emergency evacuation plan for a disabled person, might be able to say, I did what was reasonable, as opposed to what was best, i.e. necessary. It feels like this would be the moment to speak out on that and say that every disabled person should have what they need from a responsible person.
Well, I'm quite happy to say that in terms of, our disabled residents in London and elsewhere should have equity of rescue. They should make sure that they feel listened to. And if as a result of that, we need to make changes either to the legislation or in terms of our operational procedures, we're completely committed to it. That's the key thing for me, is that this is a step forward in terms of how we make sure some of our most vulnerable residents are protected, but it is only a step forward. Will there be other things that we would need to bring on board to make sure that it's developing as it should do? I've got no doubt there will be, but in terms of my commitment as the London Fire Brigade to equity of rescue for all residents in London, absolutely it's there. It's why we've got disabled members on our community forum to help make sure that the views of the disabled community are featuring in everything that we do as an organisation, and that is a commitment that I will absolutely stick to as long as I'm Commissioner.
Heard loud and clear. Thank you. Assembly Member Clark.
Thank you for that. Just coming on to modern firefighter training, which is obviously one of the important aspects of the Grenfell Fire Review that's been enacted. Obviously, we've heard on this committee, and certainly the scrutiny we've done on it, is that it's hugely successful, but it's also hugely expensive. And as we understood it, it's being funded by reserves. Have we found sustainable funding for it?
So, sorry, Assembly Member Clark, is that to me to begin with?
I think it's for you, or it could be for Jules, but it's about finding sustainable funding for modern firefighting program.
So the short answer to that question is for 26-27 we've got the funding that we need to carry on delivering the modern firefighting strategy, because as you quite rightly pointed out, hitherto that point it had actually come from a fire safety reserve, and we were always clear in our budget planning that for 26-27 we would need additional commitment. Now, when I sat in front of the Budget and Performance Committee in December last year, I made that point very, very clear, and I was very grateful for the letter that was sent by the chair of that committee to the Mayor and the GLA. We've had support from the Mayor and cross-party across the GLA for the additional funding to bridge the gap that did exist if we hadn't have had that additional funding from the Mayor, which I'm very grateful for. That means we can now take the next stage of modern firefighting forward. There will then be a discussion around what that looks like in 27, 28, 28, 29. But the important thing is we can now have the planning to deliver the second phase of modern firefighting, because we've got that security around the budget. So I'm very, very grateful for that. But again, this will be a conversation we'll need to come back round to in the next stage of budget setting for years 2 and 3 in the current planning cycle. But as far as being able to take this forward, we've got the money that we need to now take this forward, which I'm very grateful for.
Yeah, that's really good news, because when we had the Mayor's Chief of Staff, he told the full Assembly that you were looking at new and more efficient ways of funding this. But it sounds like you've identified that.
Well, there's certainly a question around how we fund all of our training, and can we drive some efficiencies in all of that. That's absolutely true. I'm sure there will be things that we can do that are more efficient in terms of the way that training is delivered. But fundamentally, the modern firefighting strategy means exposing our firefighters to all of those types of risks that we were talking about before, whether it's high-rise, basement, wildfire, marauding terrorist attack, lithium-ion batteries. The list goes on. And that's expensive, because we'll often need to take firefighters to external venues where we can really put them in real fire scenarios and test them against the environments that they're going to deal with. That's where this funding is going, and I'm grateful that for the next financial year we've got that sustainability in terms of taking that forward. But then we will need to come back to this conversation for years 2 and 3 in the current planning cycle. But I'm as confident as you can be that we're in a good place as far as our modern firefighting strategy is concerned. Because your point was right, it's fundamental to how we deliver our operational response to what is an ever more complicated and challenging city to keep safe, and indeed keeping our firefighters safe.
Yeah, indeed. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. It's 11:22. I'm going to suggest we adjourn until 11:30, so an 8-minute break. Thank you very much. Welcome back to this Assembly Committee meeting of the London Fire Committee. Assembly Member Hall with the next set of questions.
And these questions are on the fleet strategy. So, Jonathan, your draft budget submission shows that the LFB's fleet replacement programme is currently budgeted for 30.6 million between 2025-26 and 29-30. What will this pay for?
So this is continuing the drive around electrification of the fleet, which is something that we've continued to push for. So we've currently got our second trial now of the zero emissions pumping appliance at Hammersmith, which is actually coming back with some positive results. It also includes things like expanding our hydrogenated vegetable oil provision, which is again a way of using a much less carbon emitting fuel in our diesel tanks in our fire appliances. We've currently got 40 appliances that are using those at our bulk storage station. So it's continuing the drive to both electrify the fleet and, where we can, introduce additional measures to ensure that at the tailgate there's as less CO2 emissions as there possibly can be. That's the drive within the fleet strategy, which is actually part of our overarching carbon net zero strategy.
Okay, and along with that, or preceding that, of course, there'll be loads and loads of charging points, I take it.
So there's significant investment in our charging infrastructure, because one of the things we're key to see is investment in our fire stations. One way we are doing that is with significant infrastructure changes. So that includes some substations in some of our fire stations to make sure we've got the charging capability to charge electrical fire appliances, which, as you all know, will require a significant amount of energy in order to do that. I also see it as an opportunity to support fellow emergency services. So I think the London Ambulance Service and the Metropolitan Police have expressed an interest in being able to use our electrical charging facilities on our fire station. So there's a whole infrastructure piece, as well as what we're actually needing to do as part of our asset replacement programme. Moving away from diesel to electrification is the direction of travel that we're moving in, but it is a complicated piece because the technology has also got to evolve to keep pace with what our needs and demands are. And we're always, the operational demand takes precedent. We have to make sure that we've got what we need, but that is the direction of travel that we're moving in. And I think everything that we're seeing from the ZEPA trial up at Hammersmith shows that the technology now is coming online to make this happen.
So help me with this, because I don't understand these battery things. So would there be lots of batteries, or a very large battery, or, I mean, how does that work on a pumping appliance? I mean, I get the cars and all of that, but it's these pumping appliances that...
So you've got, I mean, you'll be testing my technical expertise here, Assembly Member Hall, but there is not one battery. I think there's 2 or 3 batteries that are large batteries that are on the pumping appliance itself, because the technology to move an HGV from A to B has been here for some time, and that's not an issue. The issue has always been around the pumping capability, which is why the trial's been really important. So interestingly, the Hammersmith appliance, which we've had operational now for the last 4 months, has just reported its first rescue, actually. So it attended a person's reported house fire and carried out a rescue. And there's been no operational issues with its ability to pump water because of the charge that the battery has got. So this is why, and that's a significant improvement from the first time that we looked at ZEPA as part of the first trial, where there were significant operational challenges with it. As I say, this technology continues to develop and evolve, which is why the fleet strategy is going to be reviewed, because as this new and emerging technology comes online, we might have to pivot differently as an organisation to see how we can take advantage of it. But at the moment, the operational trials of the ZEPA pumping appliance at Hammersmith are coming back with favourable results, but we'll need to see more data before we can then make a determination on rolling that out more widely.
Absolutely. And when you send that electric vehicle off, do you send a... Well, I was going to call it a proper vehicle, but you know what I mean. Are you sending another vehicle with it in case it fails?
That's right. So it's back. So as part of the trial, it's backed up with our current response arrangements to make sure that if there was an issue, we would have a ready-made replacement on scene to step in if required. But so far, we've not needed to do that.
Are you concerned about the 2 or 3 large batteries, very large batteries, that you will require to keep these pumping appliances going? If there's a fire with one of those, you've then got a massive issue. I know you couldn't be anywhere better off than in a fire station. I get that. But equally, these fires are something else. So you're not concerned that 3 massive batteries that you would require for that, or maybe even 6, because if a fire starts and you've got another one parked next to it that is also battery.
Well, just to provide some reassurance, Assemblymember Hall, and to the committee, that the fire safety requirements at the fire station to deal with whatever the fire loading is will be appropriate to make sure that they are providing the protection that you would expect. But this technology isn't going away anywhere, as we were discussing in our previous meeting. So to make sure that we've got the infrastructure both to support the charging and to make sure we can store these vehicles safely is all part of the plan moving forward.
So you've changed everything in Hammersmith where that vehicle is at the moment, have you, to accommodate that?
Well, what it's all about, the distance and making sure you've got separation between where the vehicle bay is and where the rest of the building is, which we already had in place for the previous appliance. But we do need to make sure that the vehicle is behaving in the way that we would expect. So at the moment, the fire safety precautions that are there are suitable and appropriate for the vehicles that we've got, and we always keep coming back to make sure it is safe and secure. So there's no further additional measures that we've needed to take at Hammersmith because we've got the separation and we've got the compartmentalisation that you would require. Fortunately, it's not caught fire yet for us to actually test whether or not they're appropriate, but I am confident that we've got the safety precautions in place and the fire safety structures within the station itself to make sure it's safe and secured in the right way.
Good, because if you haven't sorted it, then what hope has anybody else? Jules, I'll ask you this. The majority of vehicles needing to be replaced as part of the fleet replacement programme are listed as unfunded commitments in the draft budget submission. What needs to happen to ensure that the NFB meets its fleet renewal targets by 2035?
Well, the funding would have to be identified. It almost certainly would be in the form of borrowing, but it would be done in the same way as if one was replacing them with regular vehicles, that will replace them as and when. I don't think there's any suggestion that vehicles would be prematurely retired to replace with these with new technology.
Oh, good. I'm pleased to hear that.
And just on that point, actually, Assemblymember Hall, if I can, there may be a case where some of the vehicles that we got, we would extend their vehicle life, if appropriate, to enable the technology to come online, because we wouldn't replace them like for like if we knew that actually in a year or two the technology had evolved to a position where we could make a decision, which is why this has to be constantly reviewed.
Yeah.
I think it's also, it would be wise to strike a balance between being at the forefront of exploring the technology to see what advantages there are, make sure that we can meet our net zero obligations as soon as we can, balancing that with being a first adopter, sometimes that you bear all the costs, and a rush to, say, replace all the fleet all in one go, not only would be wasteful in terms of the lifetime of the life, and also in terms of carbon, not just cost of the embodied carbon in the existing vehicles in its manufacturing, but also one could quickly find oneself the owner of an obsolete fleet, albeit one's very very new. So yeah, I think it's a balance to make sure that we optimise the position as opposed to dash for something that we regret.
I couldn't agree more. You mustn't be pushed into it by the real green lobby.
As I say, balancing that with being at the forefront of testing it, so that.
Yeah, no, I get all that, but there is a balance, and everybody's pushing for this. And I agree with you, and technology changes and upgrades so quickly. And with a fleet that is so expensive, I completely agree with you. Thank you. I'm now going to ask a question on co-location, which you must be fed up because I always do. Jules, I think it was at the last meeting, you previously told the Assembly that co-location is always considered but often ruled out because it does not stack up financially. Does that mean that co-location will not happen without additional capital funding? What is the main issue with it?
As I've said before, the principal problem is that whilst many stations are located in what look like, they are well located, on high streets, for example, or at the end of high streets, in the centre of communities, and superficially it would look like a good idea if the industrial site just down the road, where it would be a perfectly good location, because obviously it's all about large vehicles, storage, comings and goings at all hours potentially. So the nearby industrial estate would look an attractive solution to move them to, along with the fire station, along with, say, the police station or the ambulance station and so on, and co-locate, and fund that with the sale of the existing assets. But that sum often doesn't add up. Not least because sometimes that those assets are listed and what one can do with them is limited. They don't necessarily lend themselves to sufficient numbers of flats, because that's inevitably what it would be, flats above perhaps something else, mixed use, something on the ground floor. The combination of all that just simply doesn't add up to the purchase of the sale of that and its development does not add up to covering the cost of the purchase of the industrial site and building a whole new purpose-built building on that site.
Okay.
And so therefore that gap would need to be funded.
Yep.
And with all the other things that we've discussed, whether it's revenue for training, whether it's capital for fleet replacement, finding within the LFB's budget the money to cover that gap is unlikely to be a priority in the short to medium term.
Yeah, you said that last time, and I accept that. One of the things I find interesting, having been to all the stations, some of them, not all of them, have got quite a bit of space there and could take a Safe Neighbour team or whatever. But in my journeys round, I was often told that firefighters do not want to be kept up all night or whatever if it's a 24-hour police base. So is there truth in that? I mean, there is truth in it because I heard it with my own ears. But I mean, what's your view of all the services? I do think the reluctance is far more from the firefighting.
I haven't got a view on that. I mean, operationally,
I think that's sensible not to have one, given that you're deputy mayor of it. But
do you think operationally they would?
Well, one of the concerns that's always been raised is that our role as a fire and rescue service obviously is a completely different remit to that of law enforcement and the police, and sometimes there's been concern around a potential blurring of those lines, and obviously the access that we have into communities is different than the police do, and there's always been concern that's been raised both by the Fire Brigades Union and others in terms of any blurring of those lines. My position's always been really, really clear that I would be keen to see more co-location with the emergency services. You know, I see that as a way of making better use of our current estate. The position's always been open to the Metropolitan Police and the London Ambulance Service, depending on their own respective estate strategies, that if our fire stations were in locations that work for them and we were able to work through what those plans were, we would be completely open to seeing what that looked like. Now, obviously, the Met Police and the London Ambulance Service have a different operating model than we do, but it's really been an open offer for some time now, which I do raise with the Met and the LAS in our quarterly meetings that I have with their senior leadership team, that we have an open offer here. If there are fires, and not all of our fire stations would work.
No.
But if there are fire stations in the right locations, if you look at the Purley example, where we've got a Safer Neighbourhood team operating out of Purley, there's a small team that operates out of Soho Fire Station as well. We've got London Ambulance Resources at Barnet Fire Station. I would be keen to see that type of initiative right across our estate. But of course, that's for the Met and the LAS to come forward and say, well, actually, what areas work for us? And then we can see what plans we could put in place. But it's always been an open offer. I see very much our fire stations as a community asset, open both to the local communities and using the community rooms that exist, but also our fellow emergency services. If they can take advantage of our estate, then there's no issue. Obviously, there have been some sensitivities around, the demarcation between law enforcement and fire and rescue. But I think we have to be much more mature in our approach to that we're all emergency services providing a service to London. These are community assets that we would want to use. But I am keen that the Met Police and the LAS are able to outline where they think some of our fire stations would provide that resource that they would need. And again, going back to our previous discussion, I think the electrical infrastructure that we're putting on our fire stations around charging facilities, I think would be one example of where we can make that available to the LAS and the Met Police in particular to take advantage of those sites. Anything that really gets more added value from our fire stations, I'm all in favour of.
Yeah, and so am I. And this has been going on for at least 10 years. Jules, perhaps you could talk with the Deputy Mayor for Policing to see. I'll give you an example. The Harrow fire station is very large, not the Stanmore one, the Harrow one. with lots of offices behind, etc. It could be a place, if only for a safer neighbourhood team or something. In Harrow now we have no front counters at all. And I just think that use of space, as you have said, is really important. So I really think it's down to you, Jules, to have a word with Kaya.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that because I am aware that the police have made a request, certainly of developers, for potential sites to locate safer neighbourhood teams offices in new developments coming forward. So it is absolutely relevant immediately at the moment. So I'll raise that with the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you. Can I just return to the fleet strategy just briefly? You mentioned that there's going to be pilots or trials rather. Just to ask when these are going to finish and will you publish the results?
So I think the ZEPA trial, I think, is due to complete at the end of the year, which will then give us a full year of data to analyse, and would be more than happy to write either formally to the committee, or if you want to come and have a discussion separately about that, then more than welcome to do it. The key thing for me is it's got to be driven by the data, how it's worked, how it's performed operationally, and then to see how we can take this forward. So more than happy to do that, Chair.
Brilliant. If you could write to the committee, and then whoever the chair is at that time can take it up from there. Next online we have Assembly Member Cooper. Thank you for
that. Good morning, Commissioner. Oh, I've got a...
Good morning.
And good morning, Deputy Mayor.
Good morning.
I want to ask you about the Community Risk Management Plan and start with Jules, if that's okay. Jules, are you satisfied that the LFP is making sufficient progress towards the commitments outlined in the Community Risk Management Plan?
Thank you. Well, I mean, it's the CRMP is a long-term strategy, so we're not yet at the point where we can, be definitive about its success. But we know even in areas that, where change will take some time, such as on staff diversity and sickness levels, as you've heard from the Commissioner earlier, we've already seen significant progress. I mean, if one looks at measures that are absolutely crucial to the safety of Londoners, such as response times and home safety checks, the LFB continue to exceed their targets, and so I think we can be confident it's moving in the right direction. I think the whole CRMP approach, the way things are cascaded down from the very top and the Commissioner all the way down to the station level, and how the way things are shared with staff, I think is, has been very effective. There's much more. There's a greater oversight of programmes of work within the LFB. I think it allows staff to plan and think more strategically. There's a lot more internal governance mechanisms as well, which I think makes the whole thing more rigorous in terms of programme management. And it's allowed the better targeting of resources as well. So I think it is working effectively.
Yeah, thank you. I looked at the targets. It's very good to see so many of them on green. And quite a few of the ones that aren't fully green, they are quite small percentages or quite some figures below. So, for example, progress on staff composition, almost at 50% female staff, almost at the 90% ethnic minority staff, almost at the 10% staff with disabilities. And the one that I thought was really a long way away from target, and all the other ones on the client's arrival is very good, but number of triages via our online fire safety checker, the target's 18,000, the number of done is less than 4,000. So I'm going to come to Jonathan. What's going on there? Would you like to comment on progress towards the targets and a couple of others that we're slightly below on? And I think Assembly Member Hall has already mentioned sickness, which is not on target.
No, so you're absolutely right. With the online triage, you see a big disparity between our original target and what we're actually delivering on. Funnily enough, we're having a review of that KPI at the moment because it may well be that we were slightly over-ambitious when we were developing the CRMP in terms of what we thought we were going to be able to put online as opposed to those physical visits. Now, we are committed to continuing to drive up the numbers of online safety checker visits that we see, because that does need to improve. But I think we were probably, on reflection, over-ambitious in terms of what the initial target was. The key thing for me, which again is in the data when you look at the KPIs around the community risk management plan, is the numbers of home fire safety visits that are being done to our most vulnerable residents, which we're currently on schedule to be delivering at 62%. The target was 60%, because when you looked at the overarching number that we used to do of home fire safety visits sort of in 1920, I think it was somewhere in excess of 78,000. But it was a blanket approach that we used to take. We weren't actually being as intelligent as we needed to be to make sure that when you get a physical visit from a fire crew to deliver a home fire safety visit, it is being delivered to those most at need and at risk. And where those families and residents in London are not at that specific risk, we're able to move them online, because actually there's a lot you can actually do in terms of self-help and the information that's available online through that particular portal. But I think the original target was over-ambitious, which is why you see such a disparity between the numbers that we're actually driving online and what we had originally committed to. Now, that is being reviewed at the moment, and I'm expecting a paper to come to my Commissioners Board around a number of the KPIs within the CRMP, because we are at the halfway stage now where it's appropriate to review those. Are they still appropriate? Do we need to make some changes to make sure that those KPIs are delivering the improvements that we want to see in the organisation? Because that's what they're there for. So I do think we were probably originally over-ambitious in terms of what that triage looked like originally.
That is the one that's got the biggest gap, I think, and that's sort of stood out. So you're kind of at review stage rather than starting work on the next CRMP, or are you starting work on the next CRMP? And do you have a fix for the likely main issues that you're going to try and address? Will it be the same period?
So in terms of the current CRMP, because we're halfway through and we're looking at the KPIs, we're doing a review of that at the moment, and I'm expecting that report to be at my Commissioners Board in the very near future, because there may well be some tweaks and changes that we look to make, because this is a plan that takes us up to 2029. As we get halfway through, it's right that we take a bit of a pause just to make sure that those KPIs are still delivering what we would expect to be delivered as part of the overarching strategy of the organisation. The planning for the next CRMP will begin in earnest in 2027, because really you need a good 2 years prior to getting to that point to actually start to work through what we think the London Fire Brigade is going to need to meet the risks over the next 5, 10 and 15 years. But at the moment we're reviewing where we are with the current CRMP. There will be some changes to the KPIs that are put forward at Commissioners Board that will then be scrutinised by the Deputy Mayor at his board to make sure that we're still on track to deliver the ambition of the overarching strategy for 2029. But I do know that some of those KPIs, there will be proposals to make some tweaks and changes that just keep us on the upward trajectory that we've seen since it came online in 2023.
Well, that sounds good. And planning to start the review 2 years out from 2029. Does that mean, as well as internally looking at it, there will be public consultation, which I remember from the sort of 22 year, when before the implementation of this plan started in 23? And is that something that you would like to involve this committee in?
Oh, that's absolutely right, Assemblymember Cooper. There will be significant public consultation as we develop our new CRMP moving forward, because that's part of the national framework that we have to be committed to as part of our statutory obligations, but also it's the right thing to do, because the community risk management plan has to be rooted in the needs of London's communities, and the only way we can sense check that is to go through proper public consultation. So that 2 year time frame includes the consultation that we will need to do as we develop that plan moving forward.
Yeah, particularly to stretch targets for, I would recommend LFB as a place to work, or LFB as trust to serve London, where you're always going for those targets now, but you could potentially look to stretch those further. And I think public consultation would really help build trust around things like that.
That's absolutely right. If we need to put forward more stretch targets on particular areas that we want to see more improvement on, then we absolutely need to consult the public on that to make sure that that's appropriate to the needs of London and Londoners to keep the London Fire Brigade moving in this trajectory of improvement that we've been on over the course of the last 3 to 4 years, and we need to sense check that with the people that we're responsible for. And if that means we need to stretch some of those targets as a result of the feedback that we get back, then you have the commitment from me that that's exactly what we'll do.
Well, I'm sure on this occasion I can the whole of the committee and say we look forward to seeing where this next, or where this plan goes, and then the plan, and being involved in that with you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Assembly Member Hall.
Okay, we're now touching on staff composition. So, Jonathan, what have you identified as the main barriers to employment within the LFB, and how will your employee evaluation proposition address that?
So one of the bits of work that Sally's team have commissioned, actually, we brought in an individual called Steve West, who's now in charge of resourcing and promotion. One of the first things he's done is look at our recruitment programme and to understand, are there any particular barriers, particularly to underrepresented groups joining the London Fire Brigade. So one of the areas that has been clearly highlighted, we've discussed this before, is around driving licences. So one of the things I think we will look to make some changes moving forward is around the requirement for a driving licence in that initial stage of application, because there's very clear evidence that that provides a barrier. One of the big things, though, that has come out of the work that Steve and his team have done is around a misunderstanding around the work of what the London Fire Brigade absolutely does. So the employee value proposition is actually going to be about what does it mean to come and work for the London Fire Brigade? What are the careers that are available to us? And we are in small pockets, we're starting to see a change. So our fire engineering figures, with 35% of our fire engineers are now women, as opposed to a 16% national average. But when if you were to go out and ask the general public, did they understand what these other careers within the London Fire Brigade provide, they probably would not know.
No, they wouldn't.
So there's a huge education piece, but there are structural barriers like driving licences and the requirement for a driving licence, which I think if we really want to break some of the structural challenges that we've faced with making the London Fire Brigade more representative than it currently is, we're going to need to make those changes. But I think there's also, and this is coming through actually with the work that Steve has done around the EVP, a big education piece around why the London Fire Brigade is a career of choice for many, many people, not necessarily just on the front line in terms of firefighting, but in control, in fire engineering and some of our professional teams. And it may well be, just going back to the answer to Assembly Member Cooper, one of the KPIs that we're looking at, we might need to stretch a little bit further. Although we're making good progress against some of those, we may want to stretch that further because we do need to keep challenging ourselves. But we do have some structural issues, like our turnover rate of staff is very, very low.
Yeah, it is.
Now, that's a good thing because it means people want to be here and they want to work within the London Fire Brigade. But when it looks to changing the demography and the staff composition, it means it's a longer-term project. So things like changing things like the requirement for a driving licence, I think, will make a difference. Really having a big education piece around what a career in the London Fire Brigade is, both in terms of frontline firefighting and other key areas, I think is something else we need to be really resolute about, but also really being targeted. So one of the things Steve was saying is that we need to get even more sophisticated about how we target Londoners, in sports clubs, in social communities, in really going out there and showing that this is a career of choice for everybody, and then I think we'll start to see improvement within those figures. I mean, I was just looking at our staff composition figures for the latest recruits course that kicked off in January, and it was close to 24% female. So that is actually making some progress. So, but we have to keep coming back round to it. So a combination of some structural changes, the EVP, more intelligent when it comes to our outreach programme, I think will then start to make a shift.
Yeah, because of course the other problem, well, it wasn't a problem, but we were relying an awful lot of relatives join. So if you want to change the demographics, etc., do we still get that many relatives applying?
Well, it never ceases to amaze me, actually, every time I go and do a station visit, quite how many sons and daughters I see out on fire stations, which in some ways is great because that's an indication as to where we're moving as an organisation, because if you weren't happy with the work that we're doing and what it means to work for the LFB, you wouldn't recommend it to any of your friends and family. So from that side of things, that's nice to see, and it's part of the overarching family of the LFB. But you're absolutely right, there's a balance. that we do want to see, additional people coming into the organisation that come from all sorts of different backgrounds, which will then help us meet some of those challenges that the organisation is going to face over the next few years. So it's about really celebrating what works well, but also being ambitious in terms of what more we need to do to change the makeup of the organisation to reflect the risks and challenges that a modern 21st century fire and rescue service is going to face over the next 5, 10, 15 years.
I think it's a good idea to let people know exactly what it involves, because too many people think it's putting out fires, and of course fires have decreased, thankfully, so drastically. There are so many other aspects to being a firefighter.
I mean, that is such a good point. We are rescuing 6 Londoners a day at the moment, but it's from a whole range of different incident types.
Yeah.
Not just firefighting. Technical rescue now is a big part of what we do, as well as everything we do around protection and prevention. And we just need to get better at making that clear around what a career in the London Fire Brigade is all about. So I think that's a very, very fair point.
It's changed drastically, hasn't it? In LFB's most recent statement of assurance, it states LFB is within 10% of its staff composition target, with a view to review this target for 26-27. I mean, you've touched on some of this, but what will this review entail exactly?
Well, the review is looking at our current target. So if you take, in terms of women in the London Fire Brigade, the target is currently 20%, and we're currently around 19%, or just under, I think, 18.8. So do we need to be more ambitious? Do we need to look at stretching that target as part of previous conversations? So that's what that review is doing, and that there is a report that's due to be in front of my Commissioners Board in the next month that's looking at these KPR targets and whether or not we need to increase the target that we've got to stretch the organisation and to challenge ourselves, both in terms of women entering the workplace within the LFB and indeed those from ethnic minority backgrounds joining the London Fire Brigade. And if we need to challenge ourselves to do that with the target in the KPI, we're absolutely committed to doing it.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
I want to ask you about attendance times. I want to caveat it by whenever I'm at a fire station and I hear about how quick firefighters have to go from relaxing and just chilling out to suddenly responding to something. It's exactly why I'm not a firefighter. It's amazing what they do. That being said, LFB's average first pump attendance time has been gradually increasing since 2020. What are you doing to reverse this trend?
Well, I think the first thing, when it comes to attendance standards, I think the first thing I have to say is that we're well within the targets that we've set ourselves. Now, our attendance standards are the best in the country, and so they should be because of the risk profile that we currently sit on. And when you look at our first appliance attendance and our second appliance attendance, you're right, you're seeing some marginal increases. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, because one of the big things we have been reinforcing, certainly recently and over the course of the last 2 years, is making sure we drive to arrive, that we're making sure that our appliances are getting to the scene of operations within those set attendance times, which they currently are, but they're doing it safely and they're doing it carefully and they're doing it professionally. So it's always a balance, because speed of attack and speed of response is important, hence the reason we do set those targets around attendance times, but also making sure we're creating the culture that it is not seen as an act of bravado to drive as quickly as possible, particularly given the challenges that you face on London streets now with e-bikes and e-scooters and a whole range of other issues that our emergency responders have to contend with. I'm at the moment content that some of those changes we're seeing in our attendance standards are well within the remit that we've set ourselves. But if we start to see that continuing as a trend, then we'll look to try and do something about it. But at the moment, the emphasis has to be on a safe response to make sure that we get our resources there in the right way, taking into account the challenging driving environment that London provides. But at the moment, we're still seeing consistent good performance against our attendance standards, and that must continue. That is a key performance indicator that we'll never deviate from.
That's really clear, thank you. I was going to ask some questions now about home fire safety visits, but you preempted them, so I will move on to Assembly Member Clark.
Thanks for that. What impact does attending false alarms have on LFB's operational capacity?
Well, the issue around automatic fire alarms is one of the reasons we made the policy change that we did, because prior to that policy change, 40% of our attendance was to automatic fire alarms. Now, we're starting to see dramatic reductions in the numbers of times that we're attending automatic fire alarms, which means we've then got more time available to see firefighters training as they need to do. So 25% of their time should be taken up in operational training, but also in terms of their role within prevention and protection and freeing up that capacity, because it's not just actually the response to the incident. One of the other areas that was of real concern was the length of time lost in terms of returning back to the fire station once they had attended because of traffic and other issues. So the policy decision that between the hours of 7 o'clock in the morning and 8:30 in the evening, we wouldn't respond to an automatic fire alarm to a commercial premise unless it was backed up with a secondary fire call is making a real difference. Our annual target was, I think, 20,000 calls. I think at the moment, in Q3, we're looking at about 12,000 responses to those types of incidents. So it's making a real difference. And I think at the end of this current financial year, when we look at the data in the round, I think it will show a very positive story that we've reduced our attendance to automatic fire alarms that's not compromised the safety of London and Londoners. And of course, going back to the driving issue, if we are mobilising on blue lights, that's one of the most dangerous things we can ask our fire crews to do. So we need to make sure that in the vast majority of occasions when they are responding because they're genuinely needed. So we'll need to be relentless about that. I think there's still more we can do in control around check and challenge to be really relentless about driving down those calls that we go to. But that policy change has definitely made a difference, and it'll be interesting to see at the end of the financial year the overarching impact that that's made. But I can see now it's making a tangible difference in terms of the number of responses that we were going to now prior to that policy change that we made last year.
Yeah, I mean, I remember one conversation I had at one of the fire stations was how disheartening some of the firefighters felt it was to be turning up to these calls and just returning back to the fire station at the end because the alarm had been going off. But obviously one thing that we were concerned about, certainly on this committee, but I think when it went out for consultation, one of the things that was being picked up was, unintended consequences such as what if, what if you didn't respond, and what if nobody had made that secondary call? Have we had that?
Well, the interesting thing there is this is where modern technology has really made a difference. So we've got something called Good SAM now. So essentially, if there was a fire, so if we had an automatic fire alarm and there was a fire scenario and someone was able to make that call, they're able to actually share that information directly from their phone via a live video stream into our control room. So it means that we can then make mobilising decisions based on real-time live footage that we're now seeing. We didn't have that technology available last year. So I think, to answer your question, there are many more safeguards in place now to make sure that we can take an intelligent decision about the mobilisation of our resources, because, as I say, it's a risk-benefit piece here. One of the most dangerous things we can do is mobilise a fire appliance on blue lights to an incident, and we need to be assured that where we are doing that in the vast majority of occasions it's because they're genuinely needed. And I think a combination of modern technology and a more sophisticated approach to our mobilising means we're now responding in a more intelligent way. There's probably going to be more that we can do, and I think that's why we'll need to analyse the data at the end of this financial year to see the impact of that policy change. But at the moment, those safeguards are in place, and again, modern technology has played a big part in that to give that reassurance that should there be an incident at one of these buildings that fits within this remit, that we would be able to mobilise quickly with good situational awareness to deal with anything that had occurred, even though we weren't there on the original call when the automatic fire alarm went off.
Okay, thank you. And the final question was for me, and I was looking at this question and thinking, actually, this is something we should probably ask at the end of every meeting. But what more needs to be done to reduce the number of fire deaths and injuries in London?
Well, again, with fire deaths and injuries is something that we have to be relentless about. I mean, one of the KPI elements that we're looking at is because we use a 5-year rolling average at the moment, and we're trending both in terms of overarching fire deaths and accidental fire deaths slightly over the targets that we had set ourselves. It may well be that the 5-year rolling average isn't the most appropriate measure to use because that doesn't take into account population increases, for example, which have absolutely been the case. So we've seen population increases within London that will have an impact on our statistics. We did set ourselves some challenging targets in 24-25 around fire deaths more broadly, which is the right thing to do. Any fire death is one too many. There's a lot of elements that sit around fire deaths that are not within our immediate control. There are other elements of vulnerability that come in, and your propensity to be involved in a fatal fire or a fire scenario that results in a death are often linked to things like other vulnerabilities around alcohol dependence, drug misuse, social issues, age. All of these other risk factors come in, which is why, going back to the home fire safety visit piece, moving away from that blanket approach to make sure we are targeting those who are most vulnerable and most at risk is the right approach, and we need to keep pushing that forward. The localised model of borough risk management plans and station delivery plans that really hone down on local areas where our local crews know where people are at greatest risk. Again, I would expect to see that play out in the figures, but the 5-year rolling average that we currently use, I also think is challenging to really understand what that means for us as an organisation. But if there's more for us to do to drive those numbers down, then we will absolutely do it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We're nearly at the end of the meeting. I'm going to come to Assembly Member Hall in a moment. I just have one more question, which is about autonomous vehicles. Obviously, that's an emerging technology. Has there been any work done in terms of what that might do to waiting times? Or not waiting times,
It's interesting you say that, Chair, because there's a couple of emails in my box at the moment around the use of autonomous vehicles on London streets, and I think there's a workshop later on this year, which I've been invited to just understand what that's going to look like moving, because clearly that's going to come around sooner rather than later, and we need to be ready and prepared for it. So at the moment, no, I've not been actively involved in that discussion around autonomous vehicles, but it's clearly moving, and I'll look forward to that workshop, and we'll be able to report back here in terms of what more we would need to do to deal with that particular issue as it develops.
And sorry, Chair, can I just add though, although I'm not personally involved, the Mayor's Fire team based within the GLA is working obviously with the brigade, but also with key partners like the police, TfL, London Ambulance Service, GLA Transport across the piece to kind of work, to really consider the implications for policies across all those areas.
Okay. And when you say workshop, are those the kind of stakeholders you're talking about?
Absolutely, across all of the emergency services and local boroughs, and I'm looking forward to seeing what comes out of that.
Thank you very much, Assembly Member Hall.
And just two questions really from interest from before. I know Heathrow have got its own fire team, but when I visited that local station years ago, they said that one of the worst things was the automatic fire alarms going off at Heathrow, and they had to then go in and attend. Is that still happening as frequently, or has this new system helped?
I'd have to come back and actually check that very specific detail, because the only figures I've got are our overarching response arrangements. But I would absolutely expect to see Heathrow be part of that reduction. But I will double check to make sure I can give an accurate.
I'd be really interested to hear, because at one point it was that, and it was the other thing was hospitals with the nurses' stations. They were forever being called.
So hospitals have certainly reduced, that I can say, they're one of the but there's elements there that, of course, don't fit within the policy, because a hospital is still a vulnerable building that we would still respond to. But in terms of better awareness in hospitals and other similar locations, we were attending less incidents, but that's mainly to do with better education for the staff who work in those buildings rather than the policy, because a hospital would still get a full response from the London Fire Brigade because it sits outside of that policy change.
Yeah.
But I'm happy to write back on the Heathrow
I'd be really
question,
interested, because it was one of the things the firefighters there were constantly complaining about, because they were forever being called.
I can understand that.
Yeah.
No, I'd be very interested to see those direct figures in relation to Heathrow Airport, but I would expect to see a downward trajectory, but we'll double check and write back, Chair. If that's
Lovely. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
In that case, thank you both very, very much. Really enjoyed the morning. Lots of information there and detail there. It's also my last committee as chair, so thank you both very much for your cooperation during my year as chair, and also thank you to the entire committee. It's been a really good committee.
Well, if I may, Chair, just on behalf of the London Fire Brigade, and I'm sure the Deputy Mayor as well, just thank you for your chairmanship over the last year. Those reports that have come forward, particularly around things like contaminants, and everything that we talked about around culture, I think have been really, really useful for us as an organisation to keep moving forward. I'm very, very grateful for that, and appreciate all of your candour and your direct questioning at time, which is always to be welcome. So thank you.
Really appreciate that, Commissioner, and thank you, Deputy Mayor. We have a few short items of business before we conclude, but please feel free to leave. Can we note the report in today's discussion?
Noted.
Can we also delegate authority to me as chair in consultation with party group lead members to agree any output from the discussion?
Agreed.
The London Assembly's annual meeting, due to take place in May 2026, will decide which committees to establish for the 26-27 Assembly year and the timetable of meetings for those committees. I have no other urgent business. I now declare this meeting to be closed.